As retirement fast approaches, I've been thinking back on some of the highlights of my 39 plus years as a pastor. And one of the real highlights was a production of Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat that the congregation I served back in Rochester did in 2002. The Rochester suburb of Greece, New York, where Messiah Lutheran Church is located, is nationally recognized for its high school and junior high school productions of Broadway musicals. They do an absolutely astonishing job presenting these musicals of Godspell and Grease and Les Miserables and Beauty and the Beast and others. And the Eastman School of Music is close by, so there's all this talent, musical talent in the community. And we put on a Broadway quality production of Joseph for the Rochester community, and we had 4 sold-out shows over the course of 2 different weekends. And I got to play the role of Simeon, one of Joseph's brothers. And I even got to sing a solo during our performances. It was a song called Canaan Days. And I remember the words to this day, and I'm going to sing it for you this morning with a bit of background first. The song expresses the regret that Joseph's brothers feel about what they've done to their brother by selling him into slavery. Famine has just hit the land of Canaan, and Joseph's brothers are reminiscing and thinking back on all the good times they had together, but they're doing so definitely through rose-colored glasses because the times were never as good as the song imagines. The song is also intended to be sung with a French accent because there's some French words in there. So, do you remember the good years in Canaan? The summers were endlessly gold. The fields were a patchwork of clover. The winters were never too cold. We strolled down the boulevard together, and everything round us was fine. Now the fields are dead and bare, no joie de vie anywhere. Et maintenant we drink a bitter wine. Those Canaan days we used to know, where have they gone? Where did they go? Eh bien, raise your beret to those Canaan days. Do you remember those wonderful parties, the splendor of Canaan's cuisine, those extravagant, elegant soirees, the gayest the Bible has seen? It's funny, but since we lost Joseph, we've gone to the other extreme. No one comes to dinner now. We'd only eat them anyhow. I even find I'm missing Joseph's dreams. Those Canaan days we used to know, where have they gone? Where did they go? Eh bien, raise your beret to those Canaan days. It's funny, but since we lost Joseph, We've gone to the other extreme. Perhaps we all misjudged the lad. Perhaps he wasn't quite so bad. And now we miss his entertaining dreams. Those Canaan days we used to know, where have they gone? Where did they go? Eh bien, raise your beret to those Canaan days. Thank you. To really understand the part of the Joseph story that you heard, which was the reunion of Joseph, his father and brothers, we really need to start all the way back at the beginning of the story. And the story of Joseph begins when Joseph is just 17 years old. And Joseph is, in 2 words, a spoiled brat. And so the Bible describes him as out in the field, working with his brothers. And according to the Bible, Joseph goes to his father while his other brothers are working in the field with an ill report about his brothers. In other words, Joseph is stirring the pot against his 10 brothers. And to make matters worse instead of better, Joseph's father, Jacob, responds by stirring the pot even more. So Joseph and his younger brother Benjamin are the only 2 children from Jacob and the love of his life, Rachel. All of the other brothers come from different wives. And Rachel died in childbirth with Benjamin. And now Jacob, as an old man, is showering all of his affection and attention on only 2 children, the youngest 2, Joseph and Benjamin, and completely ignoring the rest of his family. Beyond this, Jacob gives Joseph this amazing coat of colors. The coat intends to represent that Jacob considers Joseph to be his true and legitimate firstborn son. He was number 11. So how do you think Joseph's brothers feel about this? And how do you think especially Reuben, the firstborn son, feels about this? It doesn't stop there. Joseph proceeds to tell his already jealous brothers about 2 dreams he's had. And one of the dreams, the brothers are sheaves of grain. And all of the sheaves of grain are bowing down to Joseph's sheaf of grain. And in another dream, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars are bowing down to Joseph. This is just too much for the brothers to take. And so they decide to kill Joseph. And they bring him out and throw him in a pit. And they sit down to have some dinner. And as they're having dinner, a group of Ishmaelites, a caravan, begins to pass by. And the oldest son, Reuben, convinces the rest of the brothers, let's not kill him, let's sell him and get some money. And that's what they do. They sell Joseph into slavery. So Joseph is now missing. What are they going to tell their father, Jacob? Well, they take this beautiful coat and they kill a lamb, and they dip the coat in lamb's blood, and they bring the coat with covered blood back to Jacob, and Jacob, of course, is convinced with the brother's explanation that the light of his life is no more. It occurred to me that this story is the anti-Job story. Remember the story of Job? At the very beginning of the story, Job is this hugely successful, very rich and wealthy man with a wonderful family, and just in the first couple of chapters, everything is taken away from him. His servants, his cattle, his livelihood, his children are killed. His wife says, "Curse God and die." And the rest of the story is how Job is protesting his fate, that he doesn't deserve it, and he's telling his wife he doesn't deserve it. He's telling 3 friends who try to convince him that he's done something wrong, and that's why all these bad things are happening to him. He says, "No, I won't accept that." And ultimately, he's challenging God, saying, "God, I don't deserve what's happening to me." And I invite you to read the story of Joseph. Not once in the entire story does Joseph complain about what's happening to him. He's the anti-Job. He's sold into slavery. He's a victim of human trafficking. Potiphar's wife accuses him of rape. He's completely innocent. He's thrown into prison. In prison, he meets 2 of Pharaoh's servants, the butler and the baker. And the butler and the baker are having these strange dreams, and no one knows what to make of them. And Joseph has this gift of being able to interpret dreams, and he interprets both the dreams of the baker and the butler. The butler's going to experience the ultimate, and the baker's going to be restored into Pharaoh's service. And when the baker's let out of prison, Joseph says, "Please remember me and what I've done for you." And the baker forgets about Joseph for 2 whole years, and he's still in prison. And then the Pharaoh, he begins to have these strange dreams, and no one can interpret them. And finally, after 2 years, the baker says, "Oh, wait a minute, I remember when I was in prison, there was this man who interpreted my dreams for me." And Joseph is released from prison, brought to Pharaoh. Pharaoh describes his dreams. Joseph successfully interprets the dreams. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And to reward Joseph, the Pharaoh says, "You're now my right-hand man. Devise a plan that Egypt will escape the 7 years of famine." And that brings us to our reading today. And there's 2 things to know about this part of the story. The first is that obviously the goodwill and the trust that Joseph has built up with Pharaoh, Pharaoh now is extending to all of Joseph's family. He says, "Bring your family to Egypt that they might escape the famine. We'll take care of them." But more importantly than that, the brat that Joseph was is gone. Even though he maintains this second highest position of authority in Egypt, what he's gone through in his life has brought him down into humility, into generosity, into gratitude. And we hear about it in those words. "To each and all of them, Joseph gave new clothing." He's got a special place in his heart for Benjamin, so Benjamin gets 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And then he sends 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, all back to his father. And then this really interesting verse. And he sent his brothers away, and as they were leaving, he said to them, "Don't quarrel along the way." Because he's remembering the family history. And he's done with all that adolescent jealousy and who's better and who's first and who mom or dad loved more. Sibling rivalry just buried. And reminded me of my mom and my mother-in-law. And each of them, in their own way, used to say to us, you get to the point in life when you realize family is the only thing you have. And life is short, sometimes unexpectedly short. So put away all that nonsense and just love each other. And the story continues. So Jacob and his family travel to Egypt. Pharaoh tells Joseph to give his family the best portion of the land. And Joseph has devised this incredibly wise plan for the 7 famine years, so that when people begin to feel hungry, they come to Joseph and say, "Give us food." And he's got storehouses of food already. He just says, "Okay, I'll trade you. I'll give you food. You give me your land." So he's increasing Pharaoh's wealth 1,000-fold. And then the scripture says, Jacob blessed Joseph and his sons before he died. And after Jacob died, Joseph's brothers began to be afraid of what Joseph will now do to them. Maybe it's all been an act. Joseph being kind to his brothers. Once their father is now dead, okay, now Joseph can really give it to them. And the climax of this whole story, and the key that unlocks its meaning, is found in Genesis chapter 50, verses 15 to 21. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, "Your father," they're making this up, but "your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you're to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers for the sins and wrongs they've committed in treating you badly. So please forgive the sins of the servants of the God your father." When their message came to Joseph, he wept. He knows what's important now. His brothers came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended it for hurt, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." And Joseph assured them and spoke kindly to them. In the year 1919, the town of Enterprise, Alabama, erected a monument in its downtown square to commemorate a unique and life-changing event in that town. For hundreds of years, the economy of Enterprise, Alabama, and the surrounding area was fueled by a single, solitary, and lucrative crop, The crop was cotton. Cotton was king. Cotton was the king of Enterprise, Alabama, its livelihood, its future, until one fateful day when all of that changed dramatically. The boll weevil, a very small variety of beetle native to Mexico with a distinctive long snout, one of the most feared insects of the cotton-producing world, migrated across the Rio Grande from Mexico into Texas and obliterated the Texas crop. And this particular variety of beetle is also a long-distance traveler, a flyer. And by 1909, the boll weevil had landed in Alabama and struck Enterprise, Alabama, and wiped out the cotton crop and its economy and its future. And 10 years later, only 10 years later, Alabama, Enterprise, Alabama, unveiled its monument in the downtown square. I see a couple of heads nodding. It is unlike any other monument in the entire world. The monument consists of a 13-foot statue of a woman dressed in Grecian robes, holding up a hundreds of times larger than life replica of the cotton-destroying, native to Mexico, most feared insect in the cotton world, the boll weevil. I think a few of you know why. Why would they do such a thing? Because the destruction of the cotton crop in Enterprise, Alabama, led to the discovery of an even more lucrative crop, one which the boll weevil has no power over: peanuts. The boll weevil meant evil against Enterprise, Alabama. But a group of out-of-the-box thinking farmers recognized that the boll weevil was the best thing that ever happened to Enterprise, Alabama. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. In Greg's memory, sometimes out of the worst, God can bring the very best.